The earth was raw and dark, a fresh wound upon the green field. On the day they buried my twin sister Lila, the sky was a relentless, mocking blue. And there he was, Leo, the love of my life, the husband of my shadow, sitting before her grave as if his soul had been poured into the dirt alongside her coffin. He cried for 3 days. 3 days without food, without water, a monument of grief that the entire village came to witness. I watched from a distance, a ghost at my own funeral. Their whispers were a chorus I knew by heart. Such a deep bond, they sighed, and so tragically short-lived. Their words painted a picture of a love story cut down in its prime, carefully editing out the 32 years Leo and I had shared as husband and wife. Even my own mother, Eleanor, turned her red-rimmed eyes to me, her voice a blade wrapped in sorrow. "Clara," she had whispered, the accusation sharp in the quiet of our home. "Why did you have to steal him from her? Steal him." As if love was a trinket to be pocketed. As if 3 decades of shared meals, quiet evenings, and caring for his aging parents were nothing but theft. It seemed the world had collectively decided to forget that I was the one who had stood by him, who had built a life with him, while Lila lived her bright, untethered life in the city. The memory of my death is a blur of headlights and a strange, weightless peace. It was midnight. I had stumbled across the wide, empty road, a days-long fugue state leading me to that exact moment. A truck sped toward me, its lights blinding. I could have moved. A single step back would have saved me. But I didn't want to. In that moment, the weight of a lifetime of being second best, of being the consolation prize, was heavier than the fear of oblivion. But Leo, ever the hero even for a wife he never wanted, shoved me aside. The sound of impact was a sickening crunch of metal and bone. He lay in a spreading pool of blood, his life seeping into the cold asphalt. He dragged in a wet, ragged breath, his eyes finding mine in the chaotic gloom. "Clara," he gasped, the words a bloody bubble. "If there is a next life, return me to Lila." Untouched. Untouched. The word echoed in the hollow of my skull. What did that even mean? That I had somehow soiled him? That our entire marriage was a stain on his pure, destined love for my sister? A sound ripped from my throat, half sob, half scream, a madwoman's laughter under the indifferent stars. That was the last sound I remembered. When I opened my eyes, the world had shrunk and rewound itself. The air was cold and carried the sharp, clean scent of coal smoke and frozen earth. The faded floral patterns on the walls were the ones from my childhood. It was the winter of 1977. I was 18 again, and the tangled threads of fate were laid out before me, ready to be woven anew. I lay on my narrow cot, listening to the familiar sounds of the house. My mother's brisk movements in the kitchen, the clatter of pots. And then the murmuring voices from the main room. I slipped out of bed and pressed my ear to the cold wood of the door. One of only 2 people in the village who got into college besides Lila, my mother was saying, her voice a low, worried hum. "He's the most promising young man around. You'd be a fool to let him go, Clara." I could picture Lila perfectly, clinging to our mother's arm, her lower lip pushed out in a perfect pout. "Mom, I'm about to go study in the city. I can find plenty of men there. Why should I be stuck on Leo, some country boy?" My fingers curled into fists at my sides. This was the script, the same one from before. Seeing Mother's hesitation, Lila pressed her advantage, her voice sweetening. "It's not such a bad idea, you know. We shouldn't waste good things on outsiders. Clara's still single, isn't she? Why not pair her with Leo?" "No, absolutely not." Mother's voice was firm, but I heard the waver in it, the same one that had crumbled last time. "I let you have your sister's chance at college, but Leo is off limits. If people in the village heard, they'd laugh at our family." Then came the performance. A scuffle, a choked sob. "Mom, if you don't agree, I won't go on living." Lila's cry was theatrically desperate. I heard a rush of movement, my mother's gasp. "My precious girl, do you want to break your mother's heart? Fine. Fine. I agree. Okay." I stepped back from the door, my blood running cold. So, this was the truth, laid bare in a way I had never witnessed in my first life. This was the conspiracy, the carefully staged drama that had set my miserable fate in motion. In my past life, I had only seen the aftermath, believing Leo and Lila's love was a force of nature I had accidentally interrupted. I never knew my own mother had brokered the deal. I had been sad, of course. I'd had feelings for Leo, the quiet, handsome boy who always seemed to look through me, searching for Lila's reflection. But I had never acted on them. I had been the good daughter, the responsible sister, swallowing my pain and stepping aside with a grace that now made me sick. The memory of the scandal flashed before my eyes. Leo coming to our house looking for Lila, the villagers discovering us alone together in a compromising situation. I had carried the shame and guilt for decades, believing it was my fault for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now I saw it for what it was, a trap orchestrated by my dear sister and my dear mother. And I, the fool weighed down by that manufactured guilt, had given my precious college spot to Lila as penance. She became the college student, the shining hope. And I married Leo under her name, carrying her identity like a shroud. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. My good sister, you've had the man and the chance to go to college. In this life you will return them to me. There was only 1 month left before I was to leave for Beijing University. I had to be careful. I had to be smart. A few days later I heard my name called as I returned from fetching water. Clara. I looked up. Leo. He stood not far from our house, tall and handsome in his worn-out jacket, the winter sun catching the angles of his face. He was the kind of boy who naturally drew eyes, a spark of potential in our small dusty village. But all I could see was the image of him lying in blood, begging me to return him untouched. Clara, didn't you hear me? He asked, a familiar, confident smile on his lips. When I didn't respond, he walked right up and without a hint of hesitation, grabbed my wrist to pull me toward the grove of trees where we used to meet in secret. In my first life, that touch would have sent a jolt through me. Now it felt like the brush of a snake. I wrenched my hand back and with all the strength I could muster, slapped him hard across the face. The crack echoed in the quiet lane. He stared at me, stunned, his cheek blooming red. If you're sick, get treated, I snapped, my voice trembling not with fear but with a lifetime of suppressed rage. Don't drag me into your madness. Don't forget you're my sister's boyfriend. He froze, studying my face closely. And in that moment I knew. It wasn't just in his eyes. It was in the very set of his shoulders, a weariness that didn't belong to an 18-year-old. Leo had been reborn. The realization was a cold shock. I hated that I understood him so well, could read the slightest shift in his expression. He, however, clearly had never understood me at all. I saw the calculations flicker behind his eyes as he quickly concluded that he was the only one who had been reborn. A desperate, possessive excitement lit his gaze. This time nothing would stop him from being with Lila forever. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me, low and intense, half warning, half a mutter to himself. Claire, think whatever you want. Call me crazy if you must, but I have to tell you this. Don't fall for me. I don't like you, not even a little. I only love your sister. If I were to marry you, I'd make sure never to have children with you. We'd be miserable enemies for life. His words were expertly aimed, a dagger thrust directly into the deepest wound of my past life. The childlessness, the countless hospital visits, the folk remedies, the devastating weight loss, all the private shames I had endured. He had held me then, whispering that I was enough, that he didn't need children. I had believed him. I had loved him for it. And all the while it had been him. He had known and he had let me bear the blame. People can always be worse than you imagine, I whispered to the frozen air, walking away without a backward glance. I kept my back straight until I closed the gate behind me, and only then did my knees give way. I collapsed to the ground, the sobs I had been holding back finally tearing free. My face was wet with the tears of 2 lifetimes. If he never loved me, then why marry me? Why mistreat me? Why squeeze out every ounce of my devotion and labor and then, in the end, save my life at the cost of his own? The contradictions were a maelstrom in my mind. Clara, get inside and help with the cooking. My mother's voice, sharp and commanding, sliced through my grief from the yard. Lila came out, smirking when she saw me on the ground. She showed no concern, only impatience. Hurry up. I'm starving. I looked straight at my twin. We shared the same eyes, the same mouth, 7 or 8 parts out of 10 in resemblance. Yet our fates had always been worlds apart. Lila was the master of performance, the sweet, charming child. I was the quiet, sullen one, never as good at pleasing the adults. What are you staring at? She frowned, her pretty face twisting in annoyance. I wiped my tears away with the back of my hand, the motion angry and final. First of all, I said, my voice low and clear, I'm your older sister. Remember to call me that before my name. Second, cooking isn't only my responsibility. You can do it too. I pushed myself to my feet, shoved past her with my shoulder and walked straight into the house, leaving her gaping after me. I had finally realized why I had suffered in my past life. It was because I had been too soft, too pliable, too easy to push around. This time I would be a firecracker. And whoever crossed me would get burned. The inside of the house was dim, smelling of boiled cabbage and old wood. Mother was kneading dough, her back to me. She didn't turn around, but her shoulders were stiff with unspoken criticism. I must be getting old, she groaned, rubbing the small of her back with a flour-dusted hand. Just 2 days of doing a little more housework and my back is killing me. In my first life I would have rushed over, full of concern, taking over the task while murmuring soothing words. Now I just glanced at her coldly. It's not your back that's hurting, it's your eyes. You just don't like what you see. She spun around, her mouth agape. Since elementary school I had been the one doing the bulk of the chores. As I got older I'd carried the burden of this household on my shoulders while Lila preened and rested. Now, after I had consciously rested for just 2 days, she was acting as if the world was ending. When I didn't move to help, her feigned pain turned to real anger. She suddenly threw the kitchen knife onto the wooden board with a loud clatter and pointed a floury finger at me. Clara, so you've been accepted to college and now you think you're too good to do chores or help in the fields. Your wings have hardened, haven't they? Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. Maybe you shouldn't go at all. Maybe Lila should take your place and go study instead. This was it. The threat laid bare sooner than I had expected. In the past, this would have filled me with a cold dread, sending me into a frenzy of compliance. But not this time. This time I had a new strategy. Instead of arguing, I let my face crumple. I let out a wail, a sound of pure theatrical despair that would have made Lila proud, and I bolted out the door. I can't live anymore. I cried, making sure my voice carried to every corner of the village. I worked so hard to get into college and now Mom wants me to give it up for my sister. She might as well let me die. I ran, not too fast, letting my mother chase after me. Claire, come back. Don't say things like that. Let's talk, she shouted, her face a mask of panic and fury. But I didn't stop. I ran a full circle around the cluster of houses, past the well, along the main path, sobbing and shouting my grievance to the heavens. I made sure every busybody, every kind soul, every potential witness saw and heard. I was painting a picture of blatant, cruel favoritism for the entire village to see. In my past life I had suffered in silence, swallowing my words until they festered inside me. This time I would let them all out. Trading barbs was simple, but winning the court of public opinion was a weapon my reputation-obsessed mother would fear. When I felt the moment was right, I slowed my run and headed for the riverbank, the traditional stage for village dramas. Soon Mrs. Wan, a kind-hearted woman known for her sense of justice, caught me in her soft, ample arms. I buried my face in her rough-spun coat, wailing as I repeated my story. She always favors Lila. She always has. Now she wants to take my future, my only way out. My mother finally caught up, breathless, trying to drag me back. Stop this nonsense. Come home. But Mrs. Wan blocked her, her face stern. Enough, Eleanor. Can't you see what you're doing to the child? The commotion had drawn a crowd. Then Village Chief Zhang stepped forward, his face like thunder. He was a man of principle who valued education. Letting the younger sister take the older sister's place in school? Was that your idea, Eleanor? My mother, cornered and flushing a deep, mortified red, tried to backtrack. I was only joking with Clara. Joking? Chief Zhang's voice boomed. How can you joke about something like this? Ever since your husband passed, you've become more and more outrageous. Let me make this clear. He looked around, making eye contact with the gathered villagers. No one will ever bring up replacing Clara's college spot again. It's against the law. I understand, my mother muttered, her spirit broken, her reputation in tatters. My eyes drifted through the crowd and landed on Lila's face. She was hiding behind a group of women, her expression twisted with pure, venomous resentment. One look at her and I knew this wasn't over. Ever since we were children, anything that was mine, anything she wanted, she simply took. My toys, my clothes, my chances, my life. She wasn't going to stop just because of a public shaming. That night, Mother did something rare. She boiled 3 eggs. One for Lila, one for her, and one for me. In the past she always only boiled two, claiming they were for me and Lila, though I always ended up giving mine to her. It was a small, pathetic peace offering, but it highlighted the simplest solution that had always been available. Just boil 3 eggs. We were eating in strained silence when a voice called from outside. Lila, are you home? It was Leo. Lila's eyes lit up like lanterns. She gave me a triumphant look, her chin lifted high, and proudly walked out. My chest tightened, an old, familiar ache. I blamed it on withdrawal. After all, I had been married to the man for 30 years. Even among shards of broken glass, there had been moments of mistaken sweetness. Clara, don't be mad at your sister, Mom said with a forced smile, breaking the silence. That's just her temper. There was something I had held in for 2 lifetimes and I finally let it out. Mom, I said, putting down my chopsticks. I was born only 1 minute earlier than Lila. Does that 1 minute really make such a difference to you? You always told me I was the older sister, that I had to take care of her, to shoulder all the responsibility. But it was just 1 minute. Can't you stop being so biased? Her eyes instantly welled up with tears. It was a performance I knew well. Biased, she whimpered, putting on her most pitiful look. Do you know how hard it's been raising you both alone after your father passed? I've been both mother and father to you, and now you're blaming me. Will you only be satisfied when I'm dead? In the past, this guilt trip would have worked instantly. I would have knelt and apologized for my ingratitude. But in my last life I had learned a powerful word. Manipulation. Her tears were just another tool, another way of controlling me. She gave her smiles to Lila and her sorrow to me. No child should have to bear the weight of their parents' unresolved grief. This time I just crossed my arms and stared at her coldly, saying nothing. Unable to sustain the act without my participation, she finally turned away, sniffling, and went to wash the dishes. Lila came back inside a while later, her face glowing, holding a small bag of pastries. Leo said he wants to see you, she announced, her tone implying it was a royal summons. When I didn't move from my stool, her impatience flared. He's waiting for you. How can you be so rude? Go see him. I gave her a flat, uninterested glance. First of all, you're not even married to him yet. Second, even if you were, where's the law that says a brother-in-law has to meet me and I have to meet him? Spoiled and used to getting her way, Lila marched over and dragged me by the arm with surprising force. Caught off guard, I let her pull me into the yard. Leo stood there, the moonlight silvering his features. Lila immediately wailed and clung to him. Leo, my sister's bullying me again. He comforted her with practiced tenderness, stroking her hair. But when he turned to me, his voice was sharp with blame. Clara, as her older sister, can't you stop picking on Lila? I rubbed my wrist where Lila's grip had left red marks and hid it behind my back, swallowing the bitterness. I lifted my head, my face a mask of ice. Coldness was my armor, my last shred of pride. Our family's business has nothing to do with an outsider like you. Leo looked stunned. Clara, how can you be such a vile person, bullying your sister? And when I try to reason with you, you act like you're proud of it. Yes, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Yes, I'm vile and you're noble. So I, this vile person, won't bother standing in the way of you noble people anymore. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my wrist, the same one Lila had bruised. I couldn't suppress a sharp cry of pain. He quickly released me, his voice suddenly filled with worry. What happened to your hand? The concern in his voice, so at odds with his earlier cruelty, sent a treacherous flicker of softness through me. What does it matter to you? I snapped, pulling my hand back. If you have something to say, then say it. His eyes lingered on my wrist, and a dawning realization seemed to cross his face. He had seen Lila drag me out. He knew it was her who had hurt me. Lila, sensing the shift, tugged on his arm, pouting. He turned to her radiant, perfect face, and I saw the conflict in his eyes. The regrets of his past life, his singular mission to be with her, warred with this new, confusing reality. He looked back at me, his gaze wavering. Clara, he began, his voice low, your grades are good. Why don't you give your college spot to Lila? You can try again next year, okay? The words were a physical blow, a confirmation of every terrible truth. My heart clenched so hard I thought it would stop. Without a word, I raised my hand and slapped myself hard across the face. The sting was a welcome pain, a punishment for the foolish part of me that had for a single second harbored any expectation of this man. He flinched, startled. Clara, what? Leo, I interrupted, my voice hollow. You got into college too. Why don't you give your spot to my sister? Why is it always me you push around? But this wasn't just Leo. This was Leo reborn. He knew better than anyone how much I had envied Lila's education, how that regret had eaten at me for decades. Lila stepped forward, her voice shrill. Don't be ridiculous. Leo's a man. How could I let him give up his future? Besides, you're a girl. What's the use of you going to college? It's a waste. Her words carved the world into two distinct paths. One for them and one for me. One valuable, one disposable. Leo, I said, my voice trembling with the effort to keep it steady. Don't come looking for me again. I can't help my sister. I paused, forcing the next words out, each one feeling like shards of glass in my throat. As for you, I wish you both a long life together and lots of children. It was the most vicious curse I could utter, knowing their future, knowing the truth of his infertility. Leo stumbled back as if I'd struck him, his face turning a sickly pale. To him, my words sounded less like a blessing and more like a prophecy of the hell he had already lived. I didn't wait for a response. I walked back into the house, leaving them standing in the cold moonlight, and closed the door on the ghosts of my past. The next half-month passed in a tense, unnatural quiet. Mother moved through the house like a ghost, her glances toward me filled with a strange, unspoken tension. She seemed perpetually on the verge of saying something, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, but I always pretended not to notice, burying my nose in a book or busying myself with minor tasks. Lila, on the other hand, was a study in smugness. She took delight in whispering just loud enough for me to hear, detailing how wonderful Leo was to her, how much he adored her, the little gifts he brought. He said I'm the only one he's ever loved, she'd sigh dramatically, lounging on her bed while I mended clothes. He said our souls are connected across lifetimes. I treated her words like passing wind, unpleasant but transient. I was counting down the days, my focus locked on the horizon. At last, only 7 days remained. 7 days until I could escape this house that had never been a home. 7 days until I could board the train to Beijing and the life I was meant to have. Clara, did you even hear me? Lila's voice cut through my reverie. She shoved my shoulder, jolting me from my thoughts. I dug a finger lazily into my ear. Yeah, I heard you asking where my admission notice is, and I heard you say you want me to give up my chance at college in exchange for Leo. I let a slow, cold sneer spread across my face. But I don't want to. The smugness on her face solidified into something uglier. So this was it. In both lifetimes, Leo was nothing more than a bargaining chip to her, a prize to be won and then used. And yet he had spent his entire existence longing for her, deceiving me the whole time. The contempt I felt in that moment was for myself, for the girl who had once valued such a man's affection. You don't want to? What gives you the right to refuse? Her face twisted, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. Don't you like Leo? My expression could have frozen fire. When did I ever say I like Leo? If I hear you spreading that rumor outside, I'll tear your mouth apart. Clara, stop it. Mother emerged from her room, her face drawn. She was trying to smooth things over to maintain the fragile peace. I only shrugged, a gesture of supreme indifference, and watched as the two of them put their heads together, whispering. I knew they were scheming again. My skin prickled with a familiar dread. All I needed was to survive these last 7 days. Thought I was being careful. I avoided being alone. I slept with my admission letter and important documents, which I had long ago secretly entrusted to my Uncle Ben, my father's younger brother, practically memorized. But I had underestimated their desperation. A few days later I was home alone, savoring the rare silence when I heard the gate creak open. Peering through the window, my blood ran cold. It was Leo. My heart hammered against my ribs. They were trying to repeat the same old trick, the setup that had ruined me before. I grabbed a heavy wooden stick we used for beating laundry, my hands sweating. I stood at the main door, barring his entry, the stick held tight in my white-knuckled grip. I was ready to swing, to scream, to do whatever it took to avoid being trapped again. But in just half a month, Leo had changed. The boyish confidence was gone, replaced by a dark, heavy aura. His shoulders were slumped, and there were shadows under his eyes. Don't run, he said, his voice rough, devoid of its usual charm. I just want to talk. Stay right there, I warned, raising the stick. If you come closer, don't blame me for what happens. I had gone out of my way to avoid him, and his presence here now felt like a violation. He didn't advance. Instead, he slammed his fist hard against the sun-baked clay wall of our house. The impact was dull and solid. His expression was haggard. Lila told me you bully her for fun, he muttered, almost to himself. She said I was smart but too afraid of upsetting you, so I deliberately did poorly on exams at school. She claimed you liked me and wanted to steal me from her. He admitted he had believed her, thinking I was manipulative, that I was the one who had broken them apart. But then his words faltered. He stole a glance at me, at my defensive posture, the fear and determination in my eyes. But now. He trailed off. I understood. He was finally piecing it together. The way I'd been avoiding him wasn't out of some guilty, unrequited love, but out of self-preservation. He was realizing that the narrative he'd carried for a lifetime was a lie. And yet today he had still been tricked into coming here by Lila. By now, even Leo, no matter how blinded by his obsession, had to know that in our past life, I hadn't been the villain. He had thought he was forced to marry me. But wasn't I just as much forced to marry him? He took a step closer, his deep, intent eyes fixed on me with a new, unsettling intensity. Clara, he said, his voice low, only you truly cared about me. In the end, only you. I didn't let him finish. I swung the wooden stick, aiming straight for his head. Get out. I shouted. If you don't leave, I'll scream for help and call you a creep. If they charge you with that, your life will be ruined. The threat was real and he knew it. A scandal like that could get him expelled from college before he even started. Don't scream. I'll go. He ducked, stumbling backward, covering his head as he scrambled away. He was choosing his future over staying, just as he always did. From the shadows of the pigpen, Lila rushed out, her face a mask of fury. How could you drive Leo away from me? I stared coldly at her and then at my mother, who had appeared behind her, wringing her hands. This house was no longer safe. It was a snake pit. Who knew what other vicious tricks Lila might pull? I had to leave. No. My plan had been to wait until the last possible moment, but that was a luxury I no longer had. My only sanctuary was my Uncle Ben. He was the one who had always treated me with genuine kindness, 1,000 times better than my own mother ever had. He was my father's younger brother, and the two had been incredibly close. He always said that my father had worked himself to death to put him through school. After Dad passed, Uncle Ben had given money and ration tickets to my mother every month. She claimed it was she who raised me, but in truth it had been him. Mom had a comfortable life, relying first on my father and then on my uncle while I did all the housework. Yet she still played the tragic widow. In my past life, when she made me give up college for Lila, Uncle Ben had tried to reason with me over and over. But blinded by my misplaced guilt over Leo and my desire to be the good daughter, I had said cruel things to him, driving him away in his disappointment. The memory was a fresh wound. This time, after being reborn, I had gone to him immediately. I had hidden my admission notice and other documents with him for safekeeping. To avoid any more accidents, I needed to get to his house in the town center immediately. I waited until the dead of night when the house was silent. I packed a small bag with a change of clothes and the little money I had saved. I crept to the front door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached for the latch, but it wouldn't budge. I pushed. Nothing. A cold dread seeped into my bones. I felt along the edge of the door. My fingers brushed against cold, heavy iron. A padlock. They had locked me in from the outside. Lila's voice came through the wooden planks, cold and sharp as a shard of glass. Clara, hand over your admission notice. If you don't even think about leaving this room. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, despair threatening to choke me. But I forced it down. If you don't unlock the door, how am I supposed to give it to you? I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Do you expect me to pass it through the crack? Then slip it out through the gap, she insisted, her voice smug. Realizing she wouldn't fall for such a simple trick, I told her the truth. Lila, the notice isn't with me. Her laugh rang out, wild and triumphant. Then you won't have it at all. If I can't go to college, then neither can you. I was trapped. For 4 agonizing days, I was a caged animal in that dark, airless room. I paced the few steps from wall to wall, my hope dwindling with each passing hour as the date for me to report to university drew closer. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air thick with dust and despair. Mom. I finally pounded on the door on the fourth day, my voice raw and desperate. I had to try one last time. Please let me out. Let me go to college. I don't need tuition from you. I won't spend a cent of your money. I'll even earn money to give you. Just let me go. I heard a sharp intake of breath from the other side. Startled by my desperation, she hesitated. I could feel it. But Lila was there, her voice a sly, poisonous whisper. Mom, it looks like she's about to cave. Don't let her out. I changed tactics, pouring every ounce of sincerity I had left into my voice. Mom, Lila and I are sisters. We won't hold grudges overnight. If I do well, I'll help her too. I've never begged you for anything before, but I'm begging you this once. Please help me. There was a long, heavy silence outside. The silence of a conscience, however stunted, wrestling with a lifetime of bias. Just when a tiny, fragile flame of hope began to flicker in my chest, I heard the sound I had been waiting for, the metallic scrape of a key being inserted into the padlock. But then Lila's chilling voice cut through the darkness. Mom, if you let Clara go to college, I'll kill myself right here. You choose me or her. The sound of the key stopped turning. From hope to despair, it took only seconds. I slid down the door, my strength gone. Tick by tick, I counted the hopeless seconds until my mother's voice came, soft and broken. Clara, just listen to your sister. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow in the dark room. So it's true, Mom. You really can't stand on my side. Not even once. Lila sneered outside. Ha. Clara, what makes you think you can ever compare with me? That confidence, that unshakable belief in her own superiority, only came from being the favored child. I refused to back down, I said, my voice a low vow to the darkness. If you've got the guts, lock me up for the rest of my life. One day I'll still go to college. This house can't hold me forever. Even if I miss this year, I'll go next year or the year after or the year after that. But you, I said, my voice gaining strength, you'll never go to college. There was a frozen silence. What do you mean? Lila's voice was sharp. The literal meaning, I drawled, throwing her own words back at her. Mom and I have already chosen a husband for you. It's Wang Dolly from the village. You know him, right? The one famous for being lazy, for drinking and beating his wife. His first wife ran away because of his violence. She smirked, her voice dripping with venom. Clara, you refused to marry Leo when I offered him to you. Now you'll marry Wang Dolly. Are you happy now? The world tilted on its axis. Mom, I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the last vestige of my hope for her crumbling to dust. Is this true? Clara, maybe Dolly isn't as bad as people say, Mom said softly, her voice trembling. I burst out laughing, clutching my stomach, the sound hysterical and unhinged. Across both lifetimes, the biggest joke I had ever heard had come from my own mother's mouth. That Wang Dolly wasn't so bad. If he's not so bad, then why don't you marry him? I shouted, my voice cracking. Why doesn't Lila marry him? I won't marry anyone. Not him. Not anyone. I'd rather die first. Mom was struck speechless, and I heard Lila drag her away, scolding her for engaging with me. That midnight, as I sat huddled in a corner, numb with despair, another voice came from outside the window. Clara, I heard about what happened. It was Leo. Why don't you just marry me? But you'll still have to give your college spot to Lila. You can always take the exam again next year. I lifted my face from my knees, exhausted beyond measure. Even his rescue was a poisoned chalice. Leo, do you think you're some kind of great hero sacrificing yourself for Lila for your so-called great love? To me, you're nothing but a selfish, hypocritical man who only loves himself. Let me tell you this. I don't like you and I don't want to marry you. As I said the words, I felt their truth resonate through my entire being. The final ghost of my affection for him vanished, exorcised by his own pathetic offer. That can't be true, he protested, his voice desperate. How could you not like me? You copied practice books for me, organized my weak subjects, wrote more than a dozen notebooks of study notes for me. How could that not be love? So, I had once loved him that much. The memory was like something from another person's life, the actions of a foolish, hopeful girl. The hardships of my past life had scorched those feelings away, leaving only barren ground. Leo, if you really think I was ever good to you, if for just one moment you appreciated it, then let me go. No, he said, his voice stubborn. If you leave, you'll never come back. Wait for me. Tomorrow I'll break up with Lila and marry you instead. His words were not a comfort, but a final confirmation of his delusion. He still saw me as a possession, a backup plan, a consolation prize he could claim when his primary fantasy proved too difficult. From day to night and back again I sat crying on the cold, hard floor. My gaze, blurred by tears, finally landed on the box of matches and the kerosene lamp on the small table. Fire. It was a desperate, dangerous idea. But it was the only one I had left. I had to burn down the door. I moved slowly, my hands shaking. I doused the lower part of the wooden door with the kerosene, my mind a blank slate of terror and resolve. I struck a match. The flare of light was blinding in the darkness. I took a deep breath and threw it. The whoosh of igniting fuel was instantaneous. The flames leaped up, hungrily consuming the dry wood, much faster and more ferociously than I had anticipated. Thick black smoke filled the room, choking me, stealing the air from my lungs. I stumbled back, coughing, my eyes stinging. The heat was immense. I had underestimated the fire. This wasn't an escape, it was a suicide. As my consciousness began to fade, the last thing I heard was the distant, panicked shouting of voices from outside. Fire. Put out the fire. Whose house? My mother's voice, shrill with fear. Eleanor, why are you still standing around? It's your house that's on fire. Then nothing. Consciousness returned in a rush of searing pain and choking coughs. I was being carried, cradled against a strong, solid chest, the world a swirling nightmare of orange flame and black smoke. The last thing I saw before my eyes fluttered shut again was the grim, determined face of my Uncle Ben. When I woke properly, I was in a clean, sunlit room I recognized as my uncle's spare bedroom. The air smelled of soap and disinfectant, not smoke and despair. For a moment I lay perfectly still, disoriented by the peace. Then the memory of the fire, the terror, the suffocating smoke came crashing back. I sat bolt upright, a gasp catching in my raw throat. The door opened and my Aunt May hurried in, her face a mixture of relief and worry. Clara, you're awake. Thank goodness. She rushed to my side, pressing a cool hand to my forehead. Don't try to talk. Your throat must be terribly sore. I looked at her, truly looked at her. Her kindness was a balm on my scorched soul. I threw myself into her arms and cried, great heaving sobs that shook my entire body. This time the tears were real. They were for the girl who had been locked away, for the life that had been stolen, for the sheer, overwhelming relief of being saved. Child, it's over now, Aunt May murmured, stroking my singed hair. You're safe with us. Later, Uncle Ben came in, his face stern but his eyes soft with concern. You reckless, foolish girl, he scolded, but there was no heat in his words, only a deep, shuddering fear. Do you have any idea how close you came? I was coming to check on you to make sure you were ready to leave for Beijing. If I had been a minute later. He couldn't finish the sentence, just shook his head. I'm sorry, Uncle, I whispered, my voice hoarse. And I was sorry for scaring them, for the danger I had put myself in. But I was not sorry for the act itself. In my past life I had been trapped by Leo and by my mother, enslaved under the name of love, working the fields, serving the elders, carrying the burden of the family like an ox. This time I had finally broken free of the cage, even if it meant nearly burning myself alive. The villagers, Uncle Ben told me, had come quickly to put out the flames, preventing the fire from spreading to the rest of the house. The room I had been trapped in was a charred, blackened ruin, a fitting symbol of my old life. When I was about to take you away, Uncle Ben said, his expression darkening, that boy Leo rushed over. His eyes were wild. He demanded to talk to you. I stood not far away, ready to chase him off like the pest he is. I had a vague, smoke-hazed memory of it. I had agreed to speak to him, my body trembling with exhaustion and the aftermath of terror. Uncle Ben had glared from a distance, a farmer guarding his best crop from a wild boar. I had looked at the man in front of me and felt nothing. No love, no hate, only the calm detachment of staring at a stranger. Clara, don't look at me like that, Leo had begged, his voice breaking. He raised a trembling hand as if to shield himself from my empty gaze. If you have nothing more to say, I'll leave, I had said, my voice a monotone. Don't go, he had cried, falling to his knees in the dirt. When I saw you in that burning house, I realized it's you I love. Please believe me. The words that I had longed for in a dozen different lifetimes now sounded hollow and meaningless. I took pity on him enough to speak one last final truth. Once my feelings were real, I said, each word measured and clear. But now they're gone. As for what happened in our past life, let's treat it like a dream. That was enough. It had to be. As Uncle Ben and I turned to walk away, Leo's anguished cries echoed behind us, calling my name again and again. But neither of us turned back. The sound faded with each step until it was just a memory. You can still laugh? Uncle Ben had said, tapping my forehead gently, a mix of anger and profound worry on his face. Do you even realize you almost died? I'm sorry, Uncle, I had admitted again quietly, truly accepting my mistake. Now standing at the door of his tidy, warm house, I hesitated, staring at the bright, clean living room. I was filthy, my clothes smelled of smoke, my hair was unevenly burnt. I felt like I would dirty their peaceful world just by stepping inside. What do I have to do? Invite you in formally. Aunt May came out, smiling warmly. She had prepared a table full of food, a feast compared to what I was used to. Seeing my hesitation, she gently took my soot-stained hand and led me inside. This is your home now, Claire. For as long as you need it. That day at my uncle's house, I lived the only truly happy day since my rebirth. The simple acts of eating a meal together, of being spoken to with kindness, of feeling safe, they were luxuries I had almost forgotten. The next morning, before I even left my room, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Aunt May's voice was trembling with tears. You visited your brother's family so many times and I never complained. But seeing Clara today, how could a sister-in-law raise a child like that? To lock her own daughter in a room and marry her off to a brute. Enough, Uncle Ben hushed her, his voice low. Don't say too much. The child might hear. He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. Clara's going to college and from now on, part of the money and ration tickets we've been sending her mother will go directly to her. Otherwise, I won't forgive myself. I know, Aunt May added softly. Sometimes I wonder how I was lucky enough to marry a man with such a good heart. I pressed my hand over my mouth, stifling my sobs. Because of me, Uncle Ben's family had lived in hardship all these years. He had been supporting 2 households. Even my younger cousins often chose to stay at school to save money. They were so kind, so selfless. How could I bear to add to their burdens? Clara, come eat, Aunt May called from outside the door. When there was no answer, she pushed the door open. The room was empty. On the small table lay a letter and an IOU carefully written. Dear Uncle Ben and Aunt May, thank you for saving me. Thank you for your kindness. I cannot stay and be a burden to you. I have taken 20 yuan from the envelope you gave me last night. I will pay you back every cent. I am going to Beijing to start my new life. Please don't worry about me. With all my love, Clara. In 1977 tuition was free, but I still needed money for the journey and living expenses. At dawn, with the 20 yuan tucked securely into my pocket alongside my admission documents, I had slipped out and made my way to the train station. I was leaving not as a victim fleeing her past, but as a pioneer heading toward her future. The fire had burned away my old life and now I was walking toward a new one that belonged completely to me. The sky was endless, the road was long, and for the first time it was all mine. The train to Beijing was a rattling, smoke-belching beast, packed with bodies and the thick scent of sweat, hard-boiled eggs and anticipation. I found a spot by a grimy window, clutching my small bag to my chest, and watched my childhood village and then the town and then the entire province shrink into a meaningless speck on the vast map of China. With every click-clack of the wheels on the tracks, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I was free. Beijing was a shock to the system. The noise was a constant roaring hum, bicycles, buses, voices shouting in the crisp northern accent. The buildings were taller, the streets wider, the pace of life dizzying. I found my way to the university campus, a sanctuary of ancient trees and serious-faced students hurrying to and from lectures with armfuls of books. My new life was poor, starkly so, but it was filled with a purpose I had never known. The 20 yuan I had taken from Uncle Ben was a fortune and a pittance all at once. I survived on steamed buns, plain and unadorned, for every meal. I had thought I could find part-time work to support myself, But reality was far harsher than I had imagined. My major was foreign languages, a world of strange sounds and intricate grammar that I had never encountered in my past life. Rebirth gave me no advantage here. It was a field built on rote memorization and diligent practice, a completely clean slate. My classmates were brilliant and fiercely competitive, all of them from backgrounds far more privileged than my own. They rose before the sun to claim spots in the library and studied long after the lights were supposed to be out. In such an environment, there was no chance for me to spare time earning money. Every waking moment was a race to catch up. Even in my sleep, I dreamed of conjugating verbs and memorizing vocabulary lists. After 3 months, no matter how frugal I was, the 20 yuan was gone. I went from eating 3 buns a day to 2 to 1. My body, already weakened by the ordeal of the fire and the stress of my escape, finally gave out. One day, in the middle of a lecture on English phonetics, the blackboard of symbols swam before my eyes. The professor's voice became a distant echo and the world tilted and went black. I woke up on a bench outside the classroom surrounded by a circle of concerned faces. My classmates, whom I had mostly kept at a distance, fearing my poverty would be a mark of shame, were now offering help with a generosity that stunned me. "Clara, I can share my notes with you. My aunt needs a tutor for her son on weekends. The pay isn't much, but it's something. Here, I brought you a meat bun. You need to eat." Not a single one looked down on me. For the first time, I deeply understood what friendship among classmates meant. They were my comrades in arms in this battle for knowledge. We argued fiercely over pronunciation. We chased each other's grades, a friendly but intense competition that pushed us all to be better. It was a world built on merit and hard work, a world where my family name and my village background meant nothing. All that mattered was the effort I put in. Professor Chin, who taught our core linguistics class, drove the noisy students away with a wave of his hand. He was a stern, no-nonsense man in his 50s. He handed me a plain envelope, his expression forbidding. "This money is a loan from me," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "Pay me back when you can. If you don't accept it, you're not allowed in my class. My students must follow my rules." Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I took the envelope, my hand trembling. "Thank you, Professor. I will repay you. I promise." I carefully recorded every act of kindness in a small notebook I kept. They asked for nothing in return, but I was someone who always repaid favors. I fetched hot water for my dorm mates, I brought dinner to those who were studying late, I did any small task within my ability. I studied harder than ever, pushing myself to the brink of exhaustion, determined to be worthy of their help and, more importantly, worthy of myself. 3 months after my fainting spell, I was in the library when a familiar voice called my name. "Clara." I looked up and my heart leaped into my throat. It was Uncle Ben, standing in the doorway of the library, his face etched with travel weariness and a profound relief. He looked older, the worry lines on his forehead deeper than I remembered. He nearly scolded me right there in the hushed silence of the library. After I left, he had been trying to send me money and ration tickets, but because I had been too proud to give him the correct address in my note, they kept getting returned to him. The fear and guilt had eaten at him until he finally took leave from his work to find me. I was subjected to a stern but loving lecture, and I had to promise repeatedly to eat properly, to accept the money and tickets he pressed into my hand, and to write to him every week. I showered him with apologies and gratitude, my heart full. Over a simple meal in the canteen, he told me news from home. After I left, he had cut the money he sent to my mother in half. Lila had dragged her to his house to argue many times, screaming and causing scenes. But under Aunt May's firm threat that they would cut the support off entirely, they had eventually, grudgingly, accepted the reduced amount. Uncle Ben also told me that my mother had asked about me quietly a few times, her voice subdued. He said she looked much older now, her hair already half white, her body thin and frail. When he saw the coldness in my expression, he gently urged me to consider reconciliation. "After all, she is your mother," he said softly. I just shook my head. He had witnessed what I went through to escape that home. He had pulled me from a burning building. He, of all people, should understand. "What I owed her, I repaid in my last life, Uncle Ben," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "In this one, I owe her nothing." On the day he left Beijing, I walked him to the station. I watched his retreating back, sturdy and reliable, until he was swallowed by the crowd. Tears streamed down my face unchecked. For the first time, the vague, fading memory of my father's face seemed to solidify, overlaying itself onto Uncle Ben's kind, weary features. He was the father I should have had. The 4 years of college passed in a blur of intense study, friendship, and self-discovery. The unhappiness of my past seemed to fade, becoming a distant, bad dream. I grew flesh and blood again, my cheeks filling out, my eyes losing their haunted look. I became a completely different person, confident, bright, and full of a life I had built with my own 2 hands. During that time I kept in touch with Uncle Ben and Aunt May, but I never once contacted the people I had left behind. Leo, I learned from Uncle Ben's careful mentions, had come looking for me many times. He had shown up at the university gates, but I had always refused to see him. Later he got clever, bribing students from other departments to bring me letters, packages of food, even money. I returned every single thing unopened. My classmates, who had become my protective circle, noticed my annoyance at his relentless persistence. They deliberately started blocking the messengers, their goodwill for a stranger unable to withstand the annoyance of his endless, unwanted demands. Eventually even they gave up. My mother came to the school twice. Uncle Ben had, against my wishes, given her the address. The first time I was in class and my roommates told her I was away. The second time I saw her from my dorm window. Though not yet 50, she looked older than she had in her 60s and 70s in my past life. That was because in that other life I had been by her side, tending to her every need, bearing all her burdens. She had only needed to move her lips to have things done. In this life the ox had run away. Lila did nothing, so my mother had to do it all, on top of dealing with Lila's endless dramas. It was no wonder she had aged so quickly. I went down to meet her. She stood there, small and shrunken in her patched jacket, her hands twisting nervously. "Clara," she began, her voice trembling. I didn't let her finish. "Don't come looking for me again," I said, my voice calm and final. "When you reach the legal age for elderly support, I'll transfer you the minimum monthly living expenses as required by law. Beyond that, our bond as mother and daughter is finished." Maybe she didn't believe me. I had spent a lifetime tied to her, bearing the weight of her resentment and favoritism. What I owed I had repaid with interest. She stood there, trembling for a long moment, then turned and shuffled away without another word. After that, we never disturbed each other again. I stood on the campus grounds watching her go and felt the last chain around my heart snap and fall away. The past was truly behind me. My future was just beginning. Graduation day was a whirlwind of caps and gowns, proud families, and the palpable excitement of new beginnings. Thanks to my excellent grades and the strong, unwavering recommendations of my professors, I was offered a coveted position at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was a validation that left me breathless. The girl who had been locked in a room and told she was a waste was now going to represent her country. My work was demanding, often tedious, but I thrived on it. The precision of language, the weight of diplomacy, the quiet satisfaction of a well-negotiated clause. It was a world away from the dusty village and its petty dramas. Each month I sent my entire salary to Uncle Ben and Aunt May. It was a paltry repayment for a debt I could never truly settle, but it was a start. If they tried to return it, I simply sent it back again, more stubborn than they were, until they had no choice but to accept. I never dated. My life was full in a way I had never imagined possible. Of course, I was surrounded by outstanding men, brilliant colleagues, charming diplomats, who expressed admiration. But I turned them all down gently but firmly. It wasn't because I was afraid of love or still wounded by Leo. It was simpler than that. I simply had no interest. The concept of love and marriage felt like a relic from a previous civilization, a script I had no desire to follow. My happiness was not contingent on sharing my life with a man. It was built on my own accomplishments, my own peace. At first, Uncle Ben and Aunt May tried to persuade me, worried I would be lonely. But once they saw the contented, purposeful life I was building for myself in Beijing, they stopped worrying. They saw that I was whole on my own. When they retired a few years later, I brought them to live with me in the city. I rented a small but comfortable apartment for us, a place filled with light and the smell of Aunt May's cooking. I called it their well-deserved rest. They tried once more to return all the money I had sent them over the years. To my astonishment, when we sat down and calculated it, the amount totaled nearly 3,000 yuan. A small fortune. After thinking it over, I accepted it. I added my own meticulous savings to the sum and, after consulting with a few trusted financially savvy friends from work, used it as a down payment. Not for an apartment but for a sihiyuan, a traditional courtyard home in a hutong not far from the city center. It was a bold, some said reckless, investment. They called it wasteful, but I could see the spark of joy in their eyes the first time they walked through the moon gate into the private, quiet courtyard. Uncle Ben's new hobby became his morning walks through the nearby parks, where he would sit on a bench and chat with the old Beijingers, slowly picking up the local dialect. Aunt May, full of an energy she hadn't possessed in years, threw herself into a second career, using her legendary cooking skills to start a small home-based business selling pickles and preserves to neighbors and local shops. When she first broached the idea, she glanced at me nervously, afraid I, a ministry official, would be embarrassed by my aunt being a merchant. I just smiled and hugged her. "Aunt May," I said, "as long as you're happy, I'll always be your strongest supporter and your best customer." I would never forget the warmth of her embrace that day long ago, when I was a soot-stained, terrified girl, afraid of dirtying her clean living room, and she had pulled me into her arms without a second thought. This courtyard, this life I was building for them, was my embrace in return. Later, when my younger cousins finished their schooling and were ready to work, I urged them to come to Beijing. The city was exploding with opportunities and I knew they were bright, capable kids. Selfishly, I also wanted to keep Uncle Ben and Aunt May close to me. Even if my work kept me from seeing them every day, knowing they were right here, that I could come home to the sound of their voices and the smell of dinner in the courtyard, gave me a profound sense of peace I had never known. In their house, my words carried a quiet weight. My cousins respected my advice and threw themselves into their own careers with the same diligence I had learned at university. As long as nothing violated party rules or basic ethics, I gave them all the help I could. Advice on navigating the city, introductions to contacts, help finding housing and jobs. They introduced me everywhere as their big sister in Beijing. I only smiled. What you plant is what you harvest. I was the fruit Uncle Ben and Aunt May had nurtured. I was their reward. In this life I felt a deep, humming fulfillment. I had a career I was proud of, a family I had chosen, and a home that was truly my own. The past was a closed book. Meanwhile, in the village, the narrative of my old life continued without me. I learned snippets from Uncle Ben's rare, careful mentions. My mother, Eleanor, had become a ghost in her own right. She would sit for hours in front of the small black-and-white television Uncle Ben had eventually bought for her, her eyes scanning the news broadcasts, hoping for a glimpse of me. She didn't know my schedule, so she used the simplest method: vigilance. The neighbors whispered. They all knew the story. The woman who had doted on her younger daughter and driven away the capable elder one. The younger daughter, Lila, had married a local man, a fellow who had also gone to college but lacked ambition, and their life was a constant struggle. Meanwhile, the mother grew older and lonelier, her thoughts turning more and more toward the daughter she had lost. She stayed in the crumbling old house, the fire-damaged room still a blackened scar, saying she didn't want Clara to return one day and find no home. Even the young neighbors knew that Clara, the daughter who had left, could often be seen on television, a composed and articulate representative speaking for the country. Pitiful people always have their hateful sides, they would sigh among themselves. Once a month, the village chief's wife would bring my mother the envelope I sent. "Aunt Eleanor, this is the money Clara sent for your living expenses this month." My mother would carefully tuck the envelope into her inner pocket. It was her only tangible link to me, the proof that I had not completely vanished from the earth. After she turned 60, I had kept my word, sending the minimum living allowance every month like clockwork. It was a transaction cold and legal, and we both knew it. "Aunt Eleanor, that room has been burned out for nearly 20 years now," the chief's wife would say gently. "You should use the money Clara sends to repair it." "Okay," my mother would always say. But everyone knew that her "okay" was an empty sound. He never did. The charred room remained, a monument to her regret, a shrine to the daughter who had chosen fire over staying. After the chief's wife left, the fragile piece would inevitably shatter. The door would be kicked open. It never latched properly after the fire, and Lila would swagger in. "Old hag. Clara sent you money again, didn't she? Hand it over," she'd snarl, her face hardened by bitterness and a life of disappointment. "And why are you watching TV? Staring at her won't bring her back." After scolding and berating our mother until she was satisfied, Lila would snatch the money and leave, swaggering out to waste it on drink and her shiftless lover. My mother would only mutter under her breath, over and over, a mantra of self-inflicted punishment. It's retribution. Retribution. Lila would return home only after the money was gone, her arrogance undimmed. Her husband Leo would be waiting, a shell of the promising young man he had once been. "Where did you go?" he'd ask, his voice weak and bitter. "None of your business," she'd shoot back, looking at him with pure disgust. On one such day Leo's eyes, still sharp enough to notice the details of his own misery, fell on the fresh red marks on Lila's neck. A lifetime of rage and grief finally boiled over. He grabbed her, his thin fingers like bird claws on her arm. "You faithless woman. You cheated on me. I want a divorce." But Leo was little more than skin and bones, his spirit and body broken by years of regret and a toxic marriage. He was no match for Lila's heavy, robust body, fortified by her own spite. She threw him to the ground as if he were a rag doll and beat him until she was tired, then spat on him before strutting away to find more fun. Lying on the cold, hard floor, motionless and aching, Leo thought back over his miserable life. He couldn't understand how it had come to this. Because he couldn't have me, he had married Lila instead, believing she was the prize, the untainted love of his past life. She had thrown his family into chaos, her laziness and sharp tongue driving his parents to their graves years earlier. He had given up, stopped working, stopped going out, spending his days locked in endless circular fights with her. The irony was bitter. The woman who, in the past life, had died young and been eternally enshrined as his lost love, in this one seemed to thrive on their battles, her body growing stronger and coarser, while his only grew weaker and more depleted. He had gotten his wish, a long life with Lila. And it had become his personal hell. Years layered upon years. I stood in front of the imposing ministry building, the setting sun painting the Beijing skyline in shades of orange and purple. Another long day of meetings and translations was behind me. I lifted my face to the fading light, feeling the cool evening air on my skin. The world I had once thought was an unreachable dream, a fantasy glimpsed from the fields of my village, was now my everyday reality. I had not just escaped the village, I had transcended it. I had escaped the chains of my mother's favoritism and the trap of Leo's false, burdensome love. I had carved out a life entirely my own, brick by brick, word by word. My career had been a steady, satisfying climb. I was now a senior advisor, my opinion sought on complex international matters. The quiet, sullen girl from the countryside was now a woman who commanded respect in rooms filled with powerful people. I had traveled to places whose names I had once struggled to pronounce, my voice representing the nation that had given me the second chance. Uncle Ben and Aunt May lived peacefully in our courtyard home, their laughter and occasional bickering filling the space with a warmth that was the very antithesis of my childhood. My cousins had grown into capable, hard-working adults, one a successful engineer, the other a respected teacher. They carried their own pride and responsibilities, no longer needing my help, but the bond between us was unbreakable. Knowing they were near, that I had a family who loved and respected me for who I was, gave me the sense of belonging I had once longed for in vain. Sometimes, when I caught my reflection in the polished window of my office or in the glass of a framed diplomatic photograph, I would see the ghost of the girl I used to be. The one who swallowed her pain, who thought she was unworthy of love or a future of her own making. But now her eyes looked back at me from the reflection, bright, calm, and utterly unafraid. She was a part of me, but she no longer defined me. As for my mother and Lila, their lives had long since unraveled into the bitterness they had sown. The monthly allowances I sent were the only threads connecting us, and even those were thin and frayed. I no longer hated them. The emotion was too exhausting, too heavy to carry. I had simply let them go, as if they were shadows from a past that no longer had the power to bind or hurt me. They were a sad story happening to someone else, in a place that no longer felt real. I had found freedom not just from them but from the need for their approval, their love, their validation. And with that freedom came a profound, unshakable peace. This time I didn't need anyone's love to prove my worth. My life was mine to live, and I had lived it fully on my own terms. I had built my own monument not from stone, but from resilience, hard work, and the unwavering belief that I was enough. The journey had been long, from a locked room to a courtyard home, from a whispered name to a voice on the world stage. I turned from the window, collected my briefcase, and walked out into the bustling Beijing evening, a woman complete in herself, stepping not away from her past, but forward into the limitless possibilities of her own hard-won future. The seasons turned in our Beijing courtyard. The ginkgo tree Uncle Ben planted when they first moved in now cast a golden canopy every autumn, its leaves carpeting the mossy stones. In the winter we'd huddle around the coal stove, Aunt May telling stories of her childhood as the smell of roasting sweet potatoes filled the air. This was the home I had built not just with money but with love and intention. One crisp autumn afternoon I came home from work to find Uncle Ben sitting on the stone bench under the ginkgo tree, a letter in his hand. His expression was somber. "It's from the village chief," he said without preamble, handing me the thin blue airmail paper. I took it, my fingers calm. I already knew what it would say. My mother, Eleanor, was gone. She had passed in her sleep in the old, crumbling house, the fire-damaged room still untouched beside her. The chief wrote that she had been frail for a long time, and that she had often been seen sitting by the window, the television flickering with no one watching it. There was no surge of grief, no torrent of tears. There was only a quiet, settled sadness, like dust motes settling in a sunbeam. The complicated knot of resentment and pity I had carried for her had long since loosened and fallen away. She was a victim of her own choices, as trapped by her favoritism as I had been by her neglect. "Will you go back?" Aunt May asked softly, coming to stand beside me, her hand on my shoulder. I thought of the village, the dusty lanes, the whispers. I thought of the grave next to my father's, now occupied. I thought of Lila. "No," I said, folding the letter and placing it back on the bench. "There's nothing for me there. I will send money for the funeral arrangements, as is my duty. But I will not go back." They both nodded, understanding. My life, my family was here. Weeks later another letter arrived, this one from Lila. Her handwriting was spidery and frantic, filled with misspellings and venom. It was a rambling tirade, accusing me of killing our mother with my neglect, of stealing her destiny, of being a heartless witch. She demanded money, a large sum, claiming it was her inheritance. She threatened to come to Beijing and expose me to ruin my career. I read it once, then calmly fed it to the flames in the courtyard stove, watching the angry words curl into black ash and vanish. Lila's power over me had died a long time ago. Her threats were the last, desperate echoes of a ghost. I knew she would never have the courage or the means to follow through. Her world was the village. Mine was the world. We were planets in different solar systems. Life continued its peaceful rhythm. I took Uncle Ben and Aunt May on a trip to the Great Wall, watching their faces light up with wonder as they stood on the ancient stones. I helped my cousin's daughter, a bright, fierce young thing, prepare for her university entrance exams, just as my professors had once helped me. One evening I was channel surfing on the new color television I had bought for the household when a news segment caught my eye. It was a retrospective on rural development, and it showed a brief, grainy clip of my old village. The camera panned across the familiar landscape and, for a single jarring second, focused on a woman working a barren-looking plot of land. It was Lila. Her face was leathery and lined, her body thick and stooped. She looked decades older than her years. Standing a few feet away, leaning on a hoe as if it were the only thing holding him up, was Leo. His face was a mask of vacant exhaustion. They were two shadows, bound together in a misery of their own making. I felt a pang not of sympathy but of a profound, chilling clarity. That had been my destiny. That field, that man, that life of quiet desperation, that was the future I had escaped. I had not just changed my life, I had shattered the very mold it was meant to be poured into. I switched off the television. The room was quiet, filled only with the gentle sound of Aunt May humming in the kitchen. I walked out into the courtyard. The moon was high, a perfect silver disk in the inky sky. The air was cool and carried the scent of the jasmine plant I kept by the door. I breathed it in deeply, filling my lungs with the air of my own freedom. I had started this journey in the winter of 1977, a ghost in my own life, haunted by the past and terrified of the future. Now I stood here in the heart of Beijing, in a home I owned, surrounded by a family I had built, my career a testament to my own worth. The story of Clara was no longer a tragedy. It was a story of resilience. It was a story of a woman who looked at the cage she was born into and decided to break the locks, even if it meant setting herself on fire in the process. And from those ashes she had risen not just unscathed but stronger, brighter, and utterly, completely free. The past was finally, truly silent. The future was a blank page and it was all mine. The end.